Hello and welcome everyone to our MPM Skills 101 monthly webcast series. My name is Eric Desmond from the Global Customer Success Team, and I will be your moderator today. Today's presenter is Vance. The material covered today will include managing Azure and Office 365 with Nova. Today's session will last 30 to 45 minutes. It will be recorded, and we'll be sending everyone on the registration list a link to the recording for future use. Feel free to ask your questions through the chat so that they can be addressed by our team today, Rich, Jolyn, and Roland. With that, I'll hand the webcast over to our presenter today, Vance.
Great, thanks for that, Eric. Hi, everyone. As Eric said, my name is Vance Forbush, and I am a technical product manager with Quest. And today we're going to be continuing our MPM 101 webinar series, and the focus today will be using Nova to manage Azure and Office 365. Go on here. Just before we get started, I'll go over the agenda really quick. We're going to use the time today to go over how to leverage Nova to efficiently manage your environment. And part of that is going to be working on how we support multi-tenants. So we'll go over multi-tenancy within Nova, how we allow you to manage multiple tenants within one instance of the platform. Next, we'll talk about creating virtual organizational units. And that will be the basis for going through delegated administration, which will be coming up in a few points here. After that, we'll show you how to manage your users, how to make changes, and how to effectively manage within our application here. We'll follow that up with delegated administration. And so the difference between a system administrator who has full rights and then what it looks like to be a delegated administrator and get that custom RBAC, so that way you can efficiently manage based on your job role. We'll finish up with some reporting and our virtual business boundaries, and those are methods to allow you to automatically filter out reporting data, so that way each individual user or group or business unit within the organization has access to just their relevant data without having to do any automatic or any sort of manual filtering. And then last on the list, we'll talk about the future of Nova and what's on the roadmap coming up here. So starting off with multi-tenant support, the goal here is to be able to efficiently manage a multi-tenant environment. If anyone here is familiar or has done any work with multi-tenant environments, it can be difficult. I know Microsoft recently has enhanced their multi-tenant support and given you some options here. There are still some ways where that's not always optimal. I mean, you can certainly switch between tenants now a little bit more seamlessly and do some things like that, but you're still having to go from portal to portal. So there's not a lot or you're still not doing that all in one interface, and Nova allows you to do that. You're able to manage multiple tenants with a single login, and that's really big because you don't have to have credentials for different tenants, so you don't have to have an account for tenant one and then switch between that account for tenant two. So you can see in my screenshot here, I have my Quest.com account. I'm looking at one organization here, but I have a list of other tenants that I have access to, and we'll see that live here in a few moments. We're able to run reports across multiple tenants, so that's also big because I can now consolidate the views across all the tenants that I'm managing. So I can run reports against one tenant if I need to, or I can do that at a multi-tenant level as well. And then I'm able to delegate management tasks also. So it's one thing to be able to go in and manage a tenant or multiple tenants by myself, but I can then create a custom RBAC role that allows a colleague or a manager in another department to be able to manage users across tenants as well. Let's take a look at what that looks like live here. So I have, see if I can get rid of this here also. We have Nova, and it's our live environment here. This is our demo environment. So from our dashboard, what I can do is a few things. I can see that I have two tenants in this view. I'm logged into our Nova demo environment, which is a multi-tenant setup here. And if I were to go down to manage my users, what you'll notice here is that this is going to pull up the full list of users that I have access to. I have users from two different tenants in the same interface. So again, that's big because I don't have to switch between tenants. I can certainly do that if I need to. I can filter this out so I can pick one tenant or the other. But if I'm doing work across multiple tenants, and this is a two-tenant scenario, so that's not necessarily common. We do see in multi-tenant environments 10, 20 100 tenants that we're managing concurrently. So being able to do that and pull all these users up within a single interface is going to be huge, because if I need to manage licenses and go across users from tenant A, I can do that and assign them here from the pool that's available to that tenant, so it doesn't mix those licenses up or the settings up. But I'm able to do all of these things together, so I don't need to switch back and forth. Or I know Microsoft has their tenant switcher that'll allow you to click to tenant 1 and then it'll pull up that portal and then go to tenant 2. This allows you to do all of the work together, so I'm not having to bounce back and forth. So I think from an efficiency standpoint, that's huge, because anything that I can do to save time, especially in these large complex environments, is going to be something that's going to be valuable. So we have the ability to do that. And then again, if I were to click up here, I can click in the organizations. I'm not going to do that just for privacy's sake, but I can click into that like the screenshot showed. And then with my same account, that as long as I've been invited to these multiple tenants that I'm working with, I can switch between those as needed. Jump back into the slides here. We already saw what that looks like with the user management. The next thing that I want to talk about is a really big part of what we do from our delegated management perspective, and that's virtual organizational units. What this allows us to do is divide up our tenants into smaller chunks. So if you think back to on-premises Active Directory, if you go into 80 users and computers, you have the hierarchy set. So I can really divide up my organization based on what makes sense for us. So I can organize that into regions or departments or just different organizational units that allow me to put some structure behind that. Office 365 and Azure doesn't really have that. So it's more or less a flat hierarchy. So everything's dumped into the tenant. There's no real organization to it. And what we've done with our VOUs here is provided a method that allows you to mirror that experience. So you're getting that same on-premises Active Directory structure within Office 365. We work across hybrid environments as well. So we do have a hybrid on-premises Active Directory agent that you can install. And then what that allows you to do is create these OUs in Nova. So it doesn't do anything in the tenant directly. It's all on sort of the overlay that is Nova. And you can have your on-premises objects, you can have your cloud objects, and they're all managed together. So you can see in the screenshot here what that looks like. I have my tenant here, and I have my various virtual OUs, and we'll take a look at that live here. But what this allows me to do is, and we'll see this when we get into the delegated management piece here in a few minutes, is it allows me to assign these OUs to policies. So if I'm working with an admin and I only want him to manage North America, so we have North America and Europe, I don't want him to be able to see users in Europe or assign licenses or change any settings to those users or assign them to teams or groups. I can create these OUs and put the structure in place. And then when it comes time to assigning this user his policy, I can then say, you only have access to users in the West Coast, or only in Oregon, or only in Wisconsin. And then that way that user only has access to those users. So it really allows you to organize your users into a structure and give that hierarchy. But taking it a step further, it allows you to delegate those specific units of the tenant to individual users for management purposes. So we'll take a look at what that looks like again. So just switching back into Nova. If I click into Manage Administration, and I guess on the left-hand nav, I probably should have mentioned that, it's divided up into different areas. So we have our reports here, and we'll look at that in a few minutes here. When I went to manage my users, that was when I clicked on Manage here. And then a system administrator to Nova has access to Manage Administration. And that's where we create the virtual organizational units. We have our audit logs. We can create our policies here. So really all the admin level stuff that we're doing is going to take place right here within Manage Administration. So if I scroll down here to tenants, what I'll see here is, again, I'm working in a multi-tenant environment. And if I look at the tenant I'm working on here, in 4671 is the tenant that we've been primarily focusing on. I can see that I have that one, and I can expand that, and I have my other tenant here. If I expand that, I can see that I now have my organizational unit structure. So if I were to expand North America, I have my sub-OUs here, West Coast, Central, East Coast, and then I can get down to the individual states that make up those regions. So what that looks like, if I click on, let's just take California, for example, and edit that, I have the name of the OU, which is California. And it's pretty simple in this case. The assignment rule for this particular OU is that anyone whose state equals California is going to be added to this OU. And we can click into this if I wanted to see some other options we can filter on. Some of our customers tend to do this on office location or department, or if we have certain extension attributes with certain values that we want to filter these on, you can choose any of these values. And then what it does is on the back end automatically, it'll take those users based on those parameters and it'll put them in these OUs. So you essentially set the OU one time, and then it's going to automatically take those actions. So if I were to close this down and just show you some of the users in here. So the users in California are Alex, Christy, and Miriam here. And if I just click into Alex and go down to his state, so he's in San Diego, California. So naturally he was added to our California sub OU. So this has done all the work to divide these users up. Again, we have Europe. So if I go to France, just to show you what that looks like, we're doing this based on the country. So we had some states up here in North America. This time country equals France. Those users are added to our French VOU. And so then if we just go back to compare that from our overall user list, we have everyone on the list. We have different states, this tenant doesn't have those, so that just the tenant shows up. So that again kind of illustrates the flat hierarchy where the users are just part of the tenant and there's no real differentiating factors there. So we have the full list of our users here. And then in a few slides, when we go to the delegated administration piece, we'll see what that looks like from a management perspective and how we can take and get more control in that method. But really the building blocks and the basis for that are the virtual organizational units. Moving on to managing users. I think this is really the day-to-day use for Nova. This is where we see a lot of the work going through, where we have our administrators set up, we have our delegated administrators. Now, what are they going to be able to do? And again, one of the values and the benefits here is being able to consolidate all of our work into one interface. So I don't have to open up the Exchange portal, or I don't have to pull a PowerShell, or go into Teams, or go into Azure AD and manage those users. I'm taking all of those different portals and all of those different methods to manage, and I'm combining them into one interface. So I'm able to go in and select my users off the list. I can modify any of the attributes here. So if I need to assign a license, if I need to assign group membership, or revoke an MFA token, or enable MFA, I can do all of those things within Nova and without having to over permission. So it's really about right sizing permissioning. It's about not over assigning users with more permissions than they need. So I think, I've seen customers that we've started engaging with that have 10 or 12 global admins in their environment, which is certainly not what Microsoft recommends. But sometimes you need to do that because you just need to have a way to manage users who have access to perform these actions. So it's, from a security standpoint, it's really not ideal. But what Nova allows you to do is you can cut down that number of global admins, because I can now work to assign our users specific tasks that we have. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to switch back to Nova. And from a system admin, so if I go back and click on my ID up here, you can see I'm logged in as a system administrator. So I have full keys to the kingdom. So I can come in and manage everything. I have access to all the properties and all of the actions here. Again, I can come into manage administration and run some policies or create those organizational units. And I have all that access. And in a few minutes, we're going to take a look at what that looks like from a delegated perspective. But if I wanted to just click on Adele here, I can pull up her OneDrive, and I can see the items there. I can pull up mobile devices, which I don't have in this environment, but we're able to reset a device. We're able to retire that device, or remote lock it, or wipe it. Again, looking at authentication, I can reset passwords or enable MFA if I needed to. In this case, she's disabled. One thing that we see a lot of is license management. And I think it can be tricky in some cases because there are a lot of different stakeholders who are involved in license management. And I think at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're efficiently using the licenses, that we're not over licensed, that we're not using more than we've purchased. So in this case, I can see that for some strange reason, Adele has been given both the Enterprise E5 and the Enterprise E3. So our reporting would catch that, and we have reports that will show you over licensed or duplicate licenses. But in this case, if I needed to quickly rectify that, I can just go in and say, we're going to turn off her E3 because she has an E5. And then that will start the job. It's all audited. So it'll say that on July 19th, Vance went in and removed Adele's E3. So that job is running. So it hasn't been updated yet, but it will. And with just a few clicks, without having to jump between portals or do any of that sort of back and forth, I was able to make this change. I'm able to make really any change that I need to the Azure AD object here. If I go into Exchange, just focus on the same user here, I'm able to enable or disable an archive. I can change the recipient type of the user from a regular to a shared mailbox or a room mailbox if I needed to do that for this particular user. I can edit the permissions. So if I need to grant permissions to a user, I can do that. So again, this is the idea here is that this is all very efficient and I don't have to jump between portals or have to make a bunch of different scripts or commands to be able to do this. I can also manage our contacts as well. I can manage group membership. I can manage our teams. So again, from a multi-tenant perspective, I'm able to pull up the teams from both of our tenants and get in and edit these if I needed to. So I can change the settings. I can modify the ownership or members. So, again, going back to how the reporting works together with the delegation and management, I can run a report that will show me teams that don't have an owner or teams that only have one owner. And then I can go ahead and modify that just by clicking into our manage and doing it. So it's the experience is really streamlined and I don't have to bounce around and make a lot of changes. It's all right here for me. Where we take that a step further is with delegated administration. So if you're an administrator, obviously you have methods to do changes and you can, obviously we've seen how Nova makes it more efficient and I don't have to bounce around between portals or log into different areas to run or take the actions that I have. So that's certainly more efficient than doing it the native way. But as far as delegated administration, that's where we tend to see users who are over permissioned, or we're tending to see 10 global admins because we don't really have a good way to delegate admin tasks to users. So I might have a junior admin or a level 1 staff or maybe an HR person or a business owner that doesn't necessarily know how to go into the portal or for obvious reasons probably shouldn't be granted access to some of those backend portals. Natively, I don't maybe want those users to be full-on Exchange admins or user admins or licensing admins or Teams admins, but I need them to be able to take specific parts of those admin permissions and be able to use those. So maybe I need a user to create users but not delete them, or I need a user to be able to manage some Exchange settings, but I don't want them to be a full-on Exchange administrator. And so that's where the custom RBAC here within Nova comes into play, because I could take what we were looking at with the user management a few minutes ago, and I can tailor that down to specific use cases where, whether it's an HR manager who needs to be able to onboard and offboard users and assign licenses and managers and go in and create and assign some specific permissions or properties to those users. That's where the delegated administration comes into play. So we're able to really take those actions and fine tune them down to be very specific to what our users need to be able to do. So just jumping back into Nova, what that looks like here is I go into, again, manage administration, because I'm going to work to authorize these users to be able to do certain things. So if I click on our authorization policies, I'm going to look at the one that I've created here. It's called North American User Management. And so as that name suggests, this is going to focus on allowing specific users to manage only North American users. So you saw when we had our virtual OUs, we have our North American users broken into different containers, and then we have our European users that are separate. A lot of our multinational companies that we work with need to have a way to separate those actions for compliance reasons. So we need the North American users to be able to manage their users independently, and they can't even see or take any actions on the users in Europe. So what this allows us to do is handle that type of a scenario. And when we click on edit or when we click on create these policies, what this does is it's a very straightforward setup when we're creating the custom RBAC. So essentially it's who do we need to delegate to, who do we need them to manage, and then what actions do we need them to take on those managed objects. So in this case, I have my test user Megan here. I've delegated or added her as the delegate admin. So I can do this based on users. So if I wanted to scroll through the list of users, I can do that. My environment's not very big, so that's not a problem. Typically what we would see is a group. So if we have our level 1 IT staff or our support admins or the HR people, we can go ahead and delegate that by a group as well. So I can effectively, do that more efficiently based on the group. I can also add an external user. So for in a B2B scenario where we want to take a B2B account and add those users, that's the other thing I didn't necessarily talk. We talked about it a little bit, but I can use my account here, which is not associated with the tenant in any way. And as long as it's been invited and associated with that tenant, we can manage that. So if I needed to do that on an external basis, we can do that as well. For the managed objects, you can see here that I've added all of the sub-OUs here for our North American users. So in this case, I'm not going to have the same view. So when I click on manage as the system admin, I have everybody. When this user logs in, we're only going to have users from this tenant and only from the North American sub-OUs that we've created. So if I were to click on this, you could do it by user again. So if I know there's 3 users and only 3 users that Megan needs to manage, I can give her access to just those users. I can also give her access to a group or the OU, which I've done here. You can even do it based on specific individual teams. So it is, really fully integrated with teams, and we can go through and manage that based on users who are in a specific team. So, again, it's very granular and specific. So natively, again, how do I tailor this experience and how do I take these actions that I need and apply them to just a very specific set of either our on-prem hybrid users or our cloud-based users? And this is how we really address and fill in that gap here. So once we've had the delegate, the user that's going to have the permissions and the managed objects, I can then take the actions and say exactly what I need this user to be able to do. So in this case, let me just expand this out, show you the full set of actions that we have. So they're modifying mailbox permissions, they're creating and deleting users, they can set out of office, there's some group permissions that they have. So they're able to do a very specific subset of the overall management activities that we have available here. So it's not, again, going back to, I don't need this user to be a full-on Exchange admin, but I do need them to be able to modify permissions for just this very specific set of users. So that's where we get very specific and granular around tailoring these out. And if we were to look at the full list of actions and activities that we have, you can see here that there are distribution group, ownership, there's teams, there's mobile devices through Intune. So we have a full set of these activities that our users are able to take place in. And again, I can pick and choose exactly what I need them across different workloads and allow them to have those very specific activities. The last thing on the list here is our properties. So I can again choose what they have read-write access to. So if I want to look at the users, for example, they can read it, but they can't write. So when I go and switch over to Megan's view here, you'll see that she's able to see their certain attributes that they have, but she can write a few of them. So she can change a couple of, the department or the first name. So, again, depending on the job role, we might want our level 1 users to read and our level 2 users to write. So you're able to get very specific with what they're able to do. You can also create these as templates. So again, in these large multi-tenant environments or large enterprises, you might want to create the framework and build out the actions and the properties and have those set as a template. And then I can apply that template and just pick the delegated administrators and the objects that they can manage. So I don't have to constantly recreate these if I don't want to. Obviously, the more we have and the larger the environment, the more difficult that is from a management perspective. So we do have the ability to set these as templates also. So once we've done that, we can save it. And then what I'll do is just to show you what that looks like from the delegate's perspective. I can see now I'm logged in as Megan. So this has changed. Looking at that tenant here that I have access to. So you'll notice that she's not a system administrator, so she does not have access to this. So anything that a user doesn't have access to, you'll get this little pop-up in the little lock icon that tells me that I'm not privileged enough to have that. And then if I look at what she has the ability to do here from the management perspective, I can see that she wasn't given any licensing ability, so she can't assign or remove licenses. She's not able to do anything with authentication or MFA. She can set out of office for users. So this is a big use case where, maybe she's the manager of the North American users and someone's sick. So Adele is sick, so she can set the out of office for Adele without having to open a support ticket or have any access to the mailbox. She can just go ahead and set that for her users right here. She can see their OneDrives. She can see the details, but she's not able to to change most of those. So she has a very, very pared down set of activities. And again, if I were to close this, you can see that she's only seeing the US users. So it stops here with just the users who are in the OUs that we've given her access to. So with a couple of clicks here, and with the creation of this policy, what we've been able to do is take the full tenant as we have with all of our users and all of our different countries that we have access to. We've pared those down and created a hierarchy. And then I've taken that hierarchy and applied it to a user to give her a very specific use case across multiple workloads, while giving her, not over permissioning her. So there's nothing that goes on the tenant. This is all taking place within Nova. And then she has the ability to just come in here and take those actions based on the policy that she's been assigned to. Moving on to the last area that we want to focus on today, as far as Nova specifically is concerned, is the virtual business boundaries. What this allows us to do, it's similar to the virtual OUs that we created, but it's more on the reporting side of the house. So this allows us to separate the report data automatically. So again, going back to that, the compliance and the GDPR requirements in Europe, we have scenarios where you might have someone in a specific country that can't see anyone else but the users that are in their same country, or a manager that can't see any users that aren't directly reporting to him. And what the VBBs do is that allows you, and it gives you a mechanism to automatically separate that data, so that when a user logs in, they're only going to get access to their data. So we can go through and create this, and actually, without talking about, let's just show you what that looks like. Wish this bar would go away. Let me just click into the back end. So as a system administrator, I can go into our tenant management system, and this allows me to see the settings. And so when you go and set up Nova, this is going to be where you set service accounts and where you view the subscriptions. If I click on virtual boundaries over to the left, this allows me to view the boundaries and modify and create my own. So what I've done here is I've created one for our EMEA users. And if we just edit that, what this will allow us to do is we'll see this is the same process that you would get when you were creating for the first time. So I give it a name, give it a description. So I was pretty not very creative on this one, just kind of giving it the territory and what it does. So just the report boundary for our EMEA users. We can then go ahead and select what users we want to have applied to this boundary. So in this case, just picking on Megan because it's easy in this case. So Megan is going to be the user that this is applied to, who can only see our European data. I can also anonymize this. So again, going back to the compliance and regulatory reasons, there might be some specific reasons why we would want to anonymize the data. So if I check that box there, Megan won't be able to see any identifiable information for our users. So that will all be anonymous. So I haven't done that in this case, just to show you the users as they come up here in a moment. The data sources that the user has access to. This will allow you to restrict reporting down to specific data sources. I know we didn't really get into creating custom reports in Nova, but when we have that option, you can select what data source you run the report from. So there are over 80 built in right now that cover all the workloads that we report against. So you can report against Azure AD, Teams, Groups, Exchange, SharePoint, Team, OneDrive. So we have all of those different data sources. And if I wanted to give specific restrictions on this, I could say that this user is only allowed to view data for European users' Teams activity, or only their Azure AD settings. So I can restrict this down. In this case, I've just given her all of the data sources available to her. And then on the last page here, the scope restrictions, this is where we're able to really define what that means for this particular user. So in this case, I am going to add a filter group. And so I have 4 of them here. So it's just if our users have their country or region equal to Germany, England, Ireland, or France. So the 4 European countries that we have in this particular tenant, any one of these 4 requirements is going to allow those users to be populated in those reports. So I can change this to an and statement if I want to, but in this case, any of these 4 countries would apply to that particular boundary. On the last one, we have our summary. So it tells us what we've done. I'm not going to edit it because this is just to show you what that looks like. And then let's just go ahead and switch back to Megan. We'll click into a report. I have an EMEA Teams report here that we've created for her. And when we launch this report, what you'll notice is we have our European users only. So this has limited this down to just the set of users in those particular countries. It tells us what department they are. They don't have any last activity. So these are very bad users that don't use Teams. So we might, having identified that, we might want to go ahead and contact the management in their individual countries and tell them, why are you guys not using Teams? Let's get them going with it. So I've been able to identify that those users aren't actively using Teams. But again, I didn't have to do anything as Megan logged in. I didn't have to go in and do anything to run any scripts or to dump a bunch of data into Excel and then filter out all of that information. This automatically did it. So based on the fact that I'm in that boundary, I'm only going to view data for users that are applicable to me based on the fact that that's sort of my focus at this point. So again, from a user perspective and from an efficiency perspective, we don't have to take any tasks to send a report request. I can go in and create these reports myself, and then they're automatically filtered out. So it saves us a lot of time and a lot of resources where our higher level admins can focus on work that's more appropriate for them, and they're not having to field these reporting requests daily like that. The last thing that I wanted to talk about before we wrap today is where we're going with the roadmap. I don't have a slide for this today, but I did want to spend a few minutes talking about the vision going forward. Everything that we've talked about today from Nova came across from a company called Quadratech. We were acquired by Quest a year and a half ago or so. And the vision moving forward is to take what we have today within Nova and really integrate that with the broader Quest SaaS management platform. It's called On Demand, if anyone's familiar with that. But effectively, what that's going to allow us to do is really just keep enhancing the experience and giving you the ability to work through all of the cloud management capabilities in one place. So we have On Demand has some capabilities around auditing and some extensive anomaly detection. We have a full suite around migrations. We're working for some governance and some provisioning, and so we're taking what we have within Nova. Right now, they're bundled together, so existing Nova customers get access to a few of the on-demand pieces. Moving forward, that's going to be the only way that we're doing that, and so we're taking these pieces of functionality that exist within Nova, and we're wrapping those in together. So there's a lot of exciting things coming down the path. I think governance is a couple of weeks away from going live, and that will give you the ability to check your environment against best practices and see how you fit within those best practices from Microsoft, or you can define your own. And then there's the remediation that we see here with the Nova management and delegation pieces. So they work really well together, and that's really what we're looking at from the SaaS management, the platform management. So there's going to be more on that to come as we go through with that. But just understand that the way we see Nova today as sort of a separate module or separate entity, if you will, those are going to be integrated into the broader Quest on-demand platform. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their time. We're going to turn it over to Eric here in a minute to wrap up, but that concludes our MPM 101 session today. So thank everyone for your time. I appreciate that. So Eric, with that, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you for joining today's session, and thank you to our presenter, Vance Swabish.